Welcome back to my studio. Today's video is the first intro to a new video series I'm excited to share with you. I'm going to be doing a series of stitch-along videos that fit with Wonderfil's Birdwatcher Block of the Month 2024 wool quilt project. Now, Wonderfil designed this project for hand stitching with heavyweight wool thread and heavyweight cotton thread, but I'm going to be using machine applique and thread art to complete it instead. It may take some experimentation, but I think it's really important to help show how people who might have concerns with hand stitching, like I do because of arthritis, can still enjoy these great wool applique projects which are so popular. We're a bit behind Wonderfil's release of the first two blocks, but don't worry, we'll catch up soon. Also, just for full disclosure, this isn't actually a review of the project kit, and Wonderfil isn't sponsoring or helping produce these videos. However, they did sell me the kit at a discount. With that, let's get started sorting through how we're going to make this work. Today, we're going to start by making a stitch library using 12-weight cotton threads on some pre-cut pieces of wool blend felt I got for practice. The idea is to help decide which stitches we'll use instead of hand stitches in the project, or for wool applique projects in general. We'll need stitches for applique, for decoration, for piecing the blocks, and probably for other uses as we work through the project. But this will let us test them before we use them on the project kit itself. Over the course of this project, we'll go back to the library and try some other specialty threads too, or stitching techniques, so we can get the exact look we want. For example, in some places, I think we'll want to couch down some heavier weight cotton yarn that's too thick to stitch with directly. Begin by cutting blocks of fusible interfacing to match the size of your pre-cut felt pieces, and use an iron to fuse to the back of the felt blocks. I'm using Pellon SF101, which is sort of my go-to option for this kind of interfacing. Now just trim up the edges for neatness. For some of the blocks, mark horizontal lines about 1 inch apart down the blocks with chalk or other marker, depending on what works with the color of the page. Draw a vertical mark on the left side about 1 inch from the edge. This makes a page where the stitches will be sewn on the lines and the notation of the stitch number or name will be on the side. It's almost like we're making lined paper, but with fabric. For some of the blocks, using a large curved ruler, mark several curved lines. We'll use these to see how stitching a decorative pattern on a curve affects the look of the stitch. Here I'm using Odette, my Bernina 880 Plus. It doesn't matter if you're not using the same machine though. Most machines have some stitches that are either similar or would be very satisfactory for using these 12-weight specialty threads for wool applique projects. To compare, look at your manual and at the stitches available on your machine's controls. Either way, I'll provide the numbers and settings for my machine just in case you have this or another Bernina with the same stitches. I recommend starting with a cleaned and oiled machine. Wool projects can create a fair amount of fluff, and starting off clean will help avoid any problems. I'm putting in a new 116 top stitch needle, and I'm using an 80-weight polyester called Deco Bob for the bobbin. Now Wonderfil makes a set of 12-weight wool acrylic blend threads in just the right colors to accompany the project, and I'll be using these when it comes to the actual blocks. The spools are a little small though, so for these stitch tests, I'll instead thread the machine with some 12-weight cotton thread called spaghetti. You want to use a color that is going to contrast well with the background felt so you can see the details of the stitch. Don't use your machine threader to thread the needle though, because the thread is too thick and could bend or break your threader. My favorite alternative is to use a dental floss loop to get this fat thread through the needle. I get the pointy end of the flosser through the eye of the needle, then pull the thread through the loop of the dental floss. When I pull on the flosser, it guides the whole thing through the eye of the needle. Now we need to tell the machine how we want it set up. I'll show you how it works with my 880, but I think other machines have some similar interfaces. We'll be changing the stitch settings a lot today, so I'll just pick one at random for now. Lower the top tension to about 1.75 to start. Select which foot you're going to be using. For today, I'll use a 20D, an open-toed embroidery foot. Tell it we're using a 116 top stitch needle. Set the presser foot pressure. I lowered mine to 35 because we're using the thick wool felt. If your machine allows, thread the bobbin for embroidery tension as suggested in your machine's manual. In general, embroidery and decorative stitches look best if the bobbin has a slightly tighter tension than normal. Depending on your machine, you may have to use a separate bobbin case for embroidery, or one you use for adjusting your bobbin tension for specialty threads. That lets you leave one bobbin case set for the standard tension you want to be using most of the time. The reason we're setting things this way is that decorative threads look best when the tension pulls slightly to the back. You don't need to worry about the top thread pulling out onto the back because the back will be hidden in the middle of the quilt. I've got some spare empty bobbins too because at some point in this project we'll use different threads for different techniques. Let's start by picking a few stitches that can mimic some of the most common stitches in hand-sewn wool applique projects. First, we're going to need a good chain stitch. This is stitch 38, which Bernina calls a chain stitch. At the default settings, let's see how it looks. I think it's a little wide to substitute for a hand-sewn chain stitch. I'm going to narrow it a bit and try again. That looks better. Now over in the margins, I'm going to mark 38D for default, and then 38 with 1.7 stitch width. Next, we need an open fly stitch, which is kind of like a Y. There was one in the 700s maybe. I'm not sure that needs any adjusting, but let's do one sideways to see how it looks. Okay, that was number 725 with the default settings. Next, a closed fly stitch, more like a V. Let's do 701. I like that. You can also do a stitch that's pretty close to a French knot too, kind of like an asterisk. On this machine, it's 1120. I'm going to reduce the width quite a bit because the default is over 5, maybe down to 3.5. The length needs to be the same too. Now I'm going to tell the machine I just want to stitch one at a time. Just stitch the pattern, but not repeat it. So let's see what it looks like, if that looks like a French knot. That's not far removed, and it's the right size. Let's do a bunch of these. Now, one thing you can do on this machine when you have the right stitch in settings is that you can save it. I'm putting stitches for this project in folder 2. Now I'll try the default to check against my custom settings. That seems a little tight for this thread. I'm going to enlarge it. Let's do an 8 by 8. So on the side, I'll write down default, then 8 by 8. Here you can see that adjusting the stitch length and lowering the tension can make a big difference. This is stitch 137. This is 138 adjusted. The length is 29.7 and the width is 9. There are more of these leafy stitches. This one is 117. It has some satin stitching in it, which is okay, but you have to adjust things with these thicker threads. Let's try scaling it up to 120% and see if that works. So we have some leafy vines. I think these will be handy in some projects. Now let's find one we can substitute for plain outline stitching. Stitch number 6 should do. It's a triple stitch. Again, lower the top tension and lengthen the stitch because we're working with thick threads, maybe to 4. That looks great, almost like a hand outline stitch. Now for a way to keep these pages all together, I stitched and cut a buttonhole in each page and clipped them on a simple binder ring from an office supply store. I hope you're as excited as I am about this upcoming series. This is just a quick beginning. As we do each month's block, we'll add to the library as needed with the stitches we want to use for the block itself. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and be sure to click the like button as well. That should help more quilters who might be interested in this series find it. If you want to be notified when my next video is up, you can click the bell button too. For this test library, I tried to find some good but less expensive supplies you can use to save real wool and wool thread for the actual project. I'll post a list with some of the links to what I used at the end of this video. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, please post them below, and I'll try and address them as we're going through this series. With that, have fun in your studios and stay tuned for the first project block.